I never thought Christmas decorations would destroy my entire life. But there I was, standing in our dusty attic, holding proof that my marriage was built on the sickest lie imaginable. My name is Sophie, and 3 months ago, I believed I had everything. A loving husband named Ethan, a beautiful home, and what I thought was the perfect marriage. I was so naive, so stupidly, painfully naive. It was a cold December evening when I climbed those attic stairs. I was looking for our Christmas ornaments, the ones Ethan and I had collected over our 5 years together. Each one told a story of our love, or so I thought. The attic was cramped and filled with old boxes. I pushed aside some dusty furniture, and that's when I noticed it. A loose floorboard that didn't quite fit with the others. Something about it caught my eye. Maybe it was intuition. Maybe it was fate finally giving me a chance to see the truth. I pulled at the board, and it came up easily, revealing a hidden compartment underneath. Inside was a single cardboard box, sealed with old packing tape that had yellowed with time. My hands were shaking as I opened it. I don't know why, but something in my gut told me this box held secrets. Secrets that would change everything. The first thing I saw were photographs. Wedding photographs. A beautiful bride in a white dress, smiling radiantly at the camera. And next to her, in a perfect black tuxedo, was my husband, Ethan. But I wasn't the bride. The woman in the photos was Mia. The same Mia who was currently sleeping in our guest room downstairs. The same Mia who Ethan had introduced as his younger sister 6 weeks ago. The same Mia who I had welcomed into my home with open arms, cooked meals for, and even trusted to babysit our neighbors' children. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it echoing in that silent attic. I kept digging through the box with trembling fingers. More photos. Them kissing at the altar, them cutting a wedding cake, them dancing, his hand on the small of her back in a way that was definitely not brotherly. And then I found it, the marriage certificate. Ethan James Morrison and Mia Catherine Rosewood, married in Las Vegas, Nevada. The date stared back at me like a slap across the face. 7 years ago, 2 full years before Ethan had even met me. 2 years before he had gotten down on one knee in that Italian restaurant and asked me to be his wife. 2 years before I had said yes to what I thought was the love of my life. I sat there on the dirty attic floor, surrounded by the ruins of my reality, and a horrible understanding washed over me like ice water. They had never divorced, which meant that when Ethan married me 5 years ago, he was still legally married to her. I wasn't his wife, I was his mistress, and I hadn't even known it. Let me take you back to 6 weeks before that attic discovery. Back to when I still believed in the fairy tale. Back to when my biggest worry was what to cook for dinner. It was a Tuesday evening in late October. I was in the kitchen, preparing Ethan's favorite meal, pot roast with garlic mashed potatoes. I heard his key turning in the lock earlier than usual. He normally didn't get home from work until 7, but it was barely 6 o'clock. When he walked through the door, I immediately knew something was different. His face carried this expression I had never seen before, a mixture of concern and something else I couldn't quite identify. Sadness, maybe? Or was it guilt? I wish I had paid more attention to that look. "Sophie, honey, we need to talk," he said, setting his briefcase down with unusual heaviness. My heart skipped. Those 4 words, "We need to talk." They're never followed by anything good, are they? I turned off the stove and sat down at the kitchen table, my hands suddenly cold despite the warmth from cooking. Ethan sat across from me and took my hands in his. His palms were sweaty. He looked me directly in the eyes with such apparent sincerity that I felt guilty for even momentarily worrying. "It's about my sister," he began. I relaxed immediately. Not us. Not our marriage. Just family matters. I had always known Ethan came from a difficult background. He had told me early in our relationship that he was essentially alone in the world. His parents had died in a car accident when he was 19, he had said. He had a younger sister named Mia, but they had grown distant over the years. Different paths in life, he had explained. She had struggled with addiction and bad relationships, and Ethan had needed to distance himself for his own mental health. I had always admired how open he was about his painful past. It made him seem vulnerable, human, real. "What about Mia?" I asked gently, squeezing his hands. "She's in trouble, Sophie, real trouble." His voice cracked with emotion. She lost her job 3 months ago. She's been couch surfing with friends, but she's run out of options. She called me yesterday, crying. She has nowhere to go. She's going to end up on the street. My heart broke for this woman I had never met. I had been blessed with a stable, loving family. The idea of anyone, especially my husband's sister, being homeless was unbearable to me. "Oh, Ethan, that's terrible," I said. "What can we do to help?" He looked at me with such gratitude, such love, that it made my chest tight. "That's exactly why I married you, Sophie. Your heart is so big, so kind." He paused, seeming to gather courage. "I know this is a huge ask, and please feel free to say no, but would you be okay with Mia staying with us? Just temporarily? Just until she gets back on her feet? A month, maybe 2 at most?" I didn't even hesitate. How could I? This was family. This was the right thing to do. "Of course she can stay," I said immediately. "We have the guest room. It's no trouble at all." Family takes care of family. The relief that flooded Ethan's face seemed so genuine. He pulled me into a tight hug, holding me like I was the most precious thing in the world. "Thank you," he whispered into my hair. "Thank you so much. You have no idea what this means to me. To us." Looking back now, I can see how perfectly orchestrated it all was. The timing of his early arrival, the emotional manipulation, the way he made me feel like a hero for offering exactly what he wanted. But back then, I just felt like a good wife doing a good deed. Mia arrived 3 days later on a Friday afternoon. I had spent those 3 days preparing the guest room, buying fresh linens, stocking the bathroom with toiletries, and cooking extra food so she would feel welcomed and cared for. When the doorbell rang, I practically ran to answer it, excited to finally meet this sister I had heard so much about. The woman standing on my doorstep was not what I expected. She was stunning, absolutely gorgeous in a way that made me immediately self-conscious. Long dark hair that cascaded down her back in perfect waves, piercing green eyes, and a figure that looked like it belonged on a magazine cover. She wore designer jeans and a leather jacket that probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. For someone who was supposedly homeless and desperate, she looked remarkably well put together. "You must be Sophie," she said, her voice smooth and melodic. She didn't smile. She just looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read. Assessment, maybe? "Yes, and you're Mia. Please, come in, come in." I stepped aside, gesturing welcomingly. She walked past me without a thank you, dragging 2 expensive-looking suitcases behind her. She stopped in the middle of our living room and looked around slowly, taking in every detail of the home I had worked so hard to make beautiful and warm. "Quaint," she said finally. Just that one word, quaint. It felt like an insult wrapped in a compliment. Ethan appeared from the kitchen, and the change in Mia's demeanor was instant. Her face lit up. Her body language shifted. She dropped her suitcases and rushed to him, throwing her arms around his neck in a hug that lasted far too long for siblings. I felt a tiny flutter of discomfort in my stomach, but immediately squashed it. She was emotional. She was going through a hard time. Of course she would cling to her brother, her only family. "Thank you for letting me stay, Ethan," she murmured into his shoulder. Not to me. To Ethan. As if I wasn't even there, despite being the one who had agreed to open my home. Over dinner that night, I tried to get to know Mia. I asked her about her interests, her hobbies, her job history. She gave short, vague answers and spent most of the meal looking at Ethan, laughing at his jokes with an intensity that seemed excessive. When I mentioned that I worked as a freelance graphic designer from home, she said, "Oh, how nice. A little hobby business." It wasn't a hobby. It was my career. I made good money, but I didn't correct her. I wanted her to feel comfortable. When I offered to show her around the neighborhood the next day, she said, "That's okay. Ethan already knows all my favorite places. He can show me around." When I asked if she had any dietary restrictions so I could plan meals, she said, "I'm sure whatever you make will be adequate." Every response felt like a tiny paper cut, small enough to seem petty if I complained, but numerous enough to sting. That first night, after we all went to bed, I lay awake next to Ethan, staring at the ceiling. "She seems nice," I whispered, trying to convince myself. "She's just guarded," Ethan replied sleepily. "She's been hurt a lot. Give her time. She'll warm up to you." I believed him. I wanted to believe him. The first week was manageable. Mia kept to herself mostly, spending hours in the guest room with the door closed. But I started noticing small things. Strange things. The way she would rearrange furniture when I left the room, moving my carefully placed decorations to different spots. When I moved them back, she would move them again, as if testing boundaries. The way she would critique my cooking at every meal. "Might Sophie, this sauce is a bit bland, don't you think?" Or, "Ethan, remember when Mom used to make this? Now that was delicious." Ethan never corrected her, never defended me. He would just give her an indulgent smile, like she was a precocious child saying something accidentally rude. But the worst part was the way she looked at him. I started noticing it during the second week. The way her eyes would follow him around the room. The way she would find excuses to touch him. A hand on his arm when she laughed. Brushing past him in the kitchen when there was plenty of room. Sitting next to him on the couch. So close their thighs touched, even though there were other seats available. And Ethan? He didn't seem to notice. Or worse, he didn't seem to mind. One night, I woke up around 2 a.m. to use the bathroom. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed light coming from under the guest room door, and I heard voices, low, murmuring voices. I crept closer and pressed my ear against the door. "Can't keep doing this." That was Mia's voice, but it sounded different. Not the cold, distant tone she used with me. This was soft, intimate. I know, just a little longer. Trust me." Ethan. That was definitely Ethan's voice. My hand was on the doorknob before I even realized what I was doing. But then the voices stopped abruptly. I heard movement, footsteps approaching the door. I practically ran back to our bedroom and dove under the covers, my heart hammering. A few minutes later, Ethan slipped back into bed beside me. I pretended to be asleep, barely breathing. The next morning, I asked him about it at breakfast. Mia was still sleeping. "Ethan, I heard you in Mia's room last night. Is everything okay?" He looked at me with such genuine concern. "Oh, honey, I'm sorry we woke you. Mia had a nightmare, a really bad one. She was crying, and I heard her through the wall. I just went to comfort her. You know how trauma can resurface at night." I felt like a monster. Here I was, suspicious and jealous, when my sister-in-law was clearly suffering from deep psychological wounds. "Of course," I said, reaching across to squeeze his hand. "I'm glad you were there for her. That's what family does." He smiled at me, and I felt reassured. Everything was fine. I was just being paranoid, but the incidents kept happening. I would come home from running errands to find them sitting unusually close on the couch, watching a movie. They would spring apart when I entered, but not before I caught glimpses of his arm around her shoulders, her head resting against his chest. "We were just watching one of our childhood favorites," Mia would explain with a cold smile. "You wouldn't understand. It's a sibling thing. I found strands of long dark hair in our master bathroom. When I mentioned it to Ethan, he said Mia must have borrowed our shower when the guest bathroom sink was clogged. I found a pair of expensive lace underwear in our laundry that wasn't mine. Ethan said Mia must have accidentally mixed her delicates in with our clothes. An honest mistake. Every explanation was reasonable. Every explanation made sense. But together, they painted a picture I desperately didn't want to see. The final straw before my discovery came exactly 6 weeks after Mia moved in. It was a Saturday morning. I had woken up early to make breakfast, a big spread of pancakes, bacon, and fresh fruit. A peace offering, in a way. I wanted Mia to like me. I wanted us to be a real family. I was humming to myself, flipping pancakes, when I heard laughter from upstairs. Mia's laughter, bright and genuine in a way I had never heard it directed at me. I walked to the bottom of the stairs and looked up. And there, at the top of the landing, I saw them. Ethan was tickling Mia. She was in her pajamas, a silky short set that barely covered anything. She was giggling, batting at his hands playfully. And he was grinning with pure joy, chasing her down the hallway like they were teenagers. They didn't see me watching. They were too absorbed in each other. Something twisted in my chest, something dark and painful. When they finally noticed me, the playfulness evaporated instantly. Ethan cleared his throat. "Morning, Sophie. Just goofing around like we used to as kids." But the look in Mia's eyes as she stared down at me wasn't playful. It was triumphant, possessive. It was the look of a woman who knew she was winning. That afternoon, I decided to look for the Christmas decorations. I needed to do something normal, something that would make me feel in control of my own home again. And that's when I climbed those attic stairs and found the box that would reveal the truth. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what I did next. Because discovering the truth was just the beginning. The real story was what came after. I didn't go downstairs immediately after finding that box. I couldn't. My legs wouldn't work. I sat on that attic floor for what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, just staring at those photographs, trying to make sense of the impossible. My mind was racing through every moment of the past 6 weeks, every strange interaction, every uncomfortable feeling I had dismissed as jealousy or insecurity. It all made sense now. Horrible. Perfect sense. They weren't siblings. They were husband and wife, and they had moved her into my home, into my life, and made me serve her, made me cook for her, made me clean up after her, made me feel guilty for questioning their relationship. The rage that built up inside me was unlike anything I had ever felt before. It was hot and cold at the same time. It made my hands shake and my vision blur. I wanted to run downstairs and scream at them. I wanted to throw them both out into the street. I wanted to call the police right that second. But then something stopped me. A small voice in the back of my mind. A voice that sounded like my grandmother, who had raised me to be smarter than my emotions. "Sophie," that voice said, "if you confront them now, what will happen? They'll lie. They'll gaslight you. They'll make you seem crazy. You need proof. You need a plan. You need to be smarter than they are." I took a deep breath and carefully placed everything back in the box exactly as I had found it. I sealed it up, put it back in the floor compartment, and replaced the loose board. They couldn't know that I knew, not yet. When I came downstairs, carrying an empty box and looking frustrated, Ethan was in the living room watching television. Mia was sitting next to him, her head on his shoulder. They sprang apart when they heard my footsteps, but slower than they should have, like they were getting careless. Comfortable. "Couldn't find the decorations?" Ethan asked, concerned. "No," I lied smoothly, surprised at how calm my voice sounded. "I'll look again tomorrow. Maybe they're in the garage." That night, lying in bed next to a man who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, I formulated my plan. I couldn't confront them without ammunition. I needed to know everything, who they really were, what their endgame was. And most importantly, I needed evidence that would stand up legally. The next morning, I told Ethan I was meeting a college friend for lunch. Instead, I drove to a private investigation firm downtown that I had found with a quick internet search. The office was in a nondescript building, the kind of place you could walk past 100 times and never notice. The private investigator's name was Marcus Webb. He was in his 50s, gray-haired, with kind eyes that had clearly seen too much of humanity's dark side. His office was cluttered with file folders and cold coffee cups. I sat across from him and told him everything. About Ethan, about Mia, about the box in the attic, about the marriage certificate. I showed him photos I had secretly taken of the documents with my phone before leaving the attic. Marcus listened without interrupting, taking notes occasionally. When I finished, he sat back in his chair and let out a low whistle. "Mrs. Morrison," he said, "I've been doing this job for 23 years. I've seen cheating spouses, financial fraud, identity theft. But this is something else entirely." "Can you help me?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "I can," he said, "but I need you to understand something. If what you're telling me is true, if they really are running some kind of con, then confronting them prematurely could be dangerous. These people are professional manipulators. We need to gather everything before making a move. What do I do in the meantime? I asked. I have to go home and pretend everything is normal. I have to look at them every day knowing what they've done. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. That's exactly what you do. You pretend. You play the role of the naive, trusting wife, because right now, that's your greatest weapon. They think they've won. They think you're blind. Use that. Over the next 2 weeks, Marcus worked his magic while I played mine. Every morning, I woke up and kissed my fake husband goodbye. Every evening, I cooked dinner for my fake family. Every night, I smiled and pretended that my world wasn't burning down around me. But inside, I was gathering my own evidence. I started documenting everything. I set up a hidden camera in the living room, disguised as a decorative clock. I checked our bank accounts and found several large withdrawals I had never authorized, all signed with a forged version of my signature. I discovered that Ethan had taken out a second mortgage on our house without my knowledge, using fake documents. And then Marcus called me with information that changed everything. Sophie, you need to come to my office. Now. I found something big. I drove there immediately, my hands gripping the steering wheel so hard my knuckles turned white. When I walked into Marcus's office, he had papers spread across his entire desk. Sit down, he said gently. I sat. First, the background check on Ethan Morrison came back. Or should I say, the man calling himself Ethan Morrison. My blood ran cold. What do you mean, calling himself? His real name is Ethan Blackwood. And Sophie, he's done this before, multiple times. I found records of at least 3 other women over the past decade. He marries them, moves Mia in as a sister or cousin or childhood friend, gains access to their finances, and then they disappear with everything. I felt like I was going to be sick. What happened to the other women? 2 of them lost their homes, their savings, everything. They were too embarrassed to press charges. Thought they would look foolish. The third one did press charges, but Ethan and Mia skipped town before the police could arrest them. There's actually an outstanding warrant in Nevada. Oh my God, I whispered. There's more, Marcus continued. Remember how Ethan told you his parents died in a car accident? I nodded numbly. They didn't. His father is dead, that part is true. But his mother is alive. Her name is Margaret Blackwood, and she's living in a nursing home in upstate New York. I called the facility. She's there because Ethan had her committed 5 years ago, claiming she was mentally incompetent. But according to the staff I spoke with, she's completely lucid, just old and suffering from arthritis. The pieces were falling into place. He locked his own mother away. It gets worse. Margaret owns property, a house, some land. By having her declared incompetent, Ethan gained power of attorney. He's been selling off her assets piece by piece to fund his lifestyle and cons. I stood up abruptly, pacing the small office. I need to meet her. His mother. Can you arrange it? Marcus hesitated. Sophie, are you sure? This is getting complicated. Maybe we should just go to the police with what we have. No, I said firmly. Not yet. If we go to the police now, they'll run. They've done it before. I want to make sure they can't escape this time. I want them to face everything they've done. And I think Margaret deserves to be part of taking down her own son. Marcus studied me for a long moment, then nodded slowly. All right, I'll set it up. But Sophie, be careful. You're playing a dangerous game. They made it dangerous when they decided to destroy my life, I replied coldly. 3 days later, I told Ethan and Mia I was going to visit my mother for the weekend. My mother actually lived in Florida, so they had no reason to question it. Instead, I drove 4 hours north to the Riverside Care Facility. The building was depressing. Institutional gray walls, the smell of antiseptic and boiled vegetables, the sound of daytime television echoing from various rooms. I found Margaret in the common room, sitting by a window, watching birds at a feeder outside. She was a small woman, probably in her mid-70s, with white hair pulled back in a neat bun. She had Ethan's eyes, or rather, Ethan had her eyes. the same blue-gray color that I had once found so trustworthy. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said softly, sitting in the chair next to her. "My name is Sophie. I need to talk to you about your son." She turned to look at me, and I saw sharpness in those eyes, intelligence, awareness. Nothing about this woman seemed incompetent. "Which son?" she asked, her voice crisp. "I have two. One is dead to me, and one is actually dead." "Ethan?" I said. Her expression hardened. "Ah, the dead one who still walks around causing pain. What has he done now?" I told her everything. About our marriage, about Mia, about the box in the attic, about the other women he had conned, about what Marcus had discovered. She listened without interruption, her face growing more and more angry. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "I tried to warn the others, the women before you. I managed to get access to a phone a few times and track them down, but they didn't believe me. Thought I was just a crazy old woman trying to interfere in her son's happiness." "I believe you," I said simply. Tears welled up in her eyes. "Do you know why he locked me away in this place?" I shook my head. "Because I caught them. Ethan and Mia. I walked in on them when they thought I was at church. They were in his childhood bedroom, doing things no brother and sister should ever do. I confronted them, told them they were sick. Told them I was going to get Mia psychological help and that Ethan needed to leave my house." She wiped at her eyes with a trembling hand. 2 weeks later, they showed up with a doctor Ethan had paid off. The doctor declared me mentally incompetent, said I was having delusions, seeing things that weren't there. They locked me in here and I've been trapped ever since. The staff is kind, but they think I'm confused when I try to tell them the truth. My own son stole my life so he could continue his sick relationship with that woman. The rage I felt was indescribable, not just for what they had done to me, but for what they had done to this innocent woman, to all the women before me. "Mrs. Blackwood," I said, taking her hand, "how would you like to help me take them down?" Her eyes lit up with something fierce, something hungry for justice. "Tell me what you need me to do." We talked for 2 hours, formulating our plan. Margaret was sharper than most people half her age. She had ideas I never would have thought of, ways to twist the knife, ways to make sure Ethan and Mia couldn't talk their way out of what was coming. Before I left, Margaret grabbed my hand tightly. "Sophie, dear, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry my son did this to you. I failed as a mother somehow. I raised a monster." "You didn't raise a monster," I said firmly. "You raised a son. He chose to become a monster. That's not on you." As I drove home that evening, I felt different, stronger. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was focused. I had a plan. And more importantly, I had an ally who wanted revenge as badly as I did. When I walked through my front door that night, Ethan rushed to greet me. "Hey, baby, how is your mom?" "She's great," I lied with a smile. "He sends her love. How was your weekend?" "Quiet. Boring without you." He pulled me into a hug, and I forced myself not to flinch away from his touch. Over his shoulder, I could see Mia watching from the kitchen doorway. She had that same triumphant look in her eyes, like she had won something. Little did she know, the game was just beginning. And this time, I was the one who knew all the rules. The hardest part wasn't discovering the truth. It wasn't even planning the revenge. The hardest part was the waiting. Playing the role of the oblivious wife while knowing exactly what serpents I was living with. But I had learned something important from Marcus and Margaret. Patience is a weapon, and I was about to wield it masterfully. 2 weeks after my visit to Margaret, I decided it was time to set the stage for the final act. I needed to create the perfect moment. A moment where their guard would be completely down. A moment where they would feel so safe, so victorious, that the truth would hit them like a freight train. I planned a dinner party. On a Wednesday morning, over breakfast, I made my announcement. Ethan was reading the newspaper. Mia was picking at the fruit salad I had made, as usual finding something to criticize. "These strawberries are a bit overripe, don't you think, Sophie?" she said with that condescending smile. I ignored her comment and turned to Ethan with manufactured excitement. "Honey, I've been thinking, Mia has been with us for almost 2 months now, And I feel like we haven't really celebrated her being here. I want to throw a proper family dinner. This Saturday, something special. Ethan looked up from his paper, surprised but pleased. That's a wonderful idea, Sophie. That's very thoughtful of you. Mia's eyes narrowed slightly. She was suspicious. She had learned by now that I wasn't quite as naive as I had seemed at first. But Ethan gave her a look, a quick, meaningful glance that I wasn't supposed to catch, and she relaxed. How lovely, Mia said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. A family dinner. I'm sure whatever you make will be nice. Oh, I'm planning to make it more than nice, I said, smiling brightly. I'm going to make Ethan's favorite, roasted duck with cherry sauce, truffle mashed potatoes, the works. And I have a surprise planned too. A really special surprise for both of you. A surprise? Ethan asked, curious. You'll see, I said mysteriously. It's something I think will make this dinner truly unforgettable. What they didn't know was that I had already called Margaret. She was coming. And I had also contacted Marcus, who had been in touch with the Nevada Police Department about the outstanding warrant. Everything was set in motion. I spent the next 3 days preparing for Saturday's dinner with meticulous care. I cleaned the house until it sparkled. I bought expensive wine. I set the dining table with our finest china, the set my grandmother had left me, crystal glasses, cloth napkins, candles. I wanted everything to be perfect, because this wasn't just a dinner. This was a stage, and I was directing the performance of a lifetime. Ethan and Mia watched my preparations with what they thought was hidden amusement. I could see them exchanging glances when they thought I wasn't looking. Little smirks, shared jokes at my expense. On Friday night, I overheard them talking in the kitchen. I was upstairs, but our house had thin floors, and their voices carried. She's really going all out, Mia said, laughing quietly. It's almost sad. Give her this, Ethan replied. She's a good little homemaker. She really does try. How much longer do we have to keep this up? Mia asked, her voice taking on a whiny quality. I'm so tired of pretending. I miss being able to touch you properly, kiss you without hiding. Soon, baby, Ethan said, and I could hear the smile in his voice. The second mortgage money should clear next week. Once we have that, we clean out her accounts and disappear, just like always. We'll be on a beach in Mexico before she even realizes what happened. What about her grandmother's china? Mia asked. That has to be worth something. We'll take it with us. Antique shops in border towns don't ask questions. They laughed together, casual, comfortable, completely unaware that their entire world was about to collapse. I went to bed that night with my hands clenched into fists under the blankets. Just one more day. I just had to make it one more day. Saturday arrived with perfect weather. Sunny, crisp autumn air. The kind of day that felt full of possibility. I spent the entire day cooking. The duck came out perfectly, the skin crispy and golden. The cherry sauce was rich and tangy. The truffle mashed potatoes were creamy and decadent. I made roasted Brussels sprouts with bacon, fresh baked rolls, a chocolate torte for dessert. As I cooked, Mia wandered in and out of the kitchen, making her usual comments. Are you sure you didn't overcook the duck? It looks a bit dark. Truffle oil? Isn't that a bit pretentious for a family dinner? You know Ethan doesn't really like Brussels sprouts, right? Each comment was designed to undermine me, to make me feel incompetent in my own kitchen. But I just smiled sweetly and continued cooking, because I knew something she didn't. This was the last meal I would ever cook for them. At 6 o'clock, I set everything on the dining table. It looked like something out of a magazine. The food, the candles, the flowers I had arranged as a centerpiece. Everything was perfect. Ethan came downstairs first, dressed in a nice button-down shirt. He whistled appreciatively when he saw the spread. Sophie, this is incredible. You've really outdone yourself. Only the best for my family, I said, emphasizing that last word just slightly. Mia appeared a few minutes later, wearing a dress that was entirely too formal and revealing for a family dinner. But then again, she wasn't dressing for a family dinner, was she? She was dressing for her husband. We all sat down. Ethan at the head of the table, Mia to his right, me to his left, like a perfect little family. I poured the wine, an expensive Bordeaux that Ethan loved. I had made sure to choose his favorite. I wanted him relaxed, comfortable, unsuspecting. A toast, I said, raising my glass. To family, to the bonds that tie us together, and to truth. May it always come to light. Ethan and Mia raised their glasses, missing entirely the double meaning in my words. We began eating, and I started my performance. Mia, I said conversationally, I've been meaning to ask you something. It's about your childhood with Ethan. She looked at me warily. What about it? Well, Ethan has told me so many stories about growing up, about your parents, the car accident that killed them when you two were young. I paused, cutting into my duck. It must have been so traumatic. How old were you when it happened? Mia glanced at Ethan quickly. I was 12. It was very hard. 12, I repeated thoughtfully. And Ethan was 19. So there's a 7-year age gap between you two. That's right, Ethan said, jumping in. I practically raised Mia after that, more like a father than a brother sometimes. How sweet, I said. And Mia, you said earlier this week that you remembered your mother's cooking. What was her specialty? Mia froze for just a fraction of a second. Her pot roast. She made amazing pot roast. Funny, I continued, my voice still light and conversational. Because Ethan once told me that your mother was a terrible cook, that you two lived on frozen dinners and takeout. Which is it? The table went quiet. Ethan laughed nervously. Sophie, why are you interrogating us? This is supposed to be a nice dinner. Oh, I'm not interrogating, I said innocently. I'm just curious. I mean, you two are my family now. I should know these things, shouldn't I? I turned to Mia with a smile that didn't reach my eyes. Like, for instance, I'm curious about why you two don't look anything alike. Ethan has blue eyes. You have green. Ethan has light brown hair. Yours is almost black. Ethan is tall. You're quite petite. Genetics are fascinating, aren't they? Lots of siblings don't look alike, Mia said defensively. That doesn't mean anything. You're absolutely right, I agreed. But usually siblings have at least some similar features. A nose shape, an ear shape. A mannerism. But you two, I've been watching, and I can't find a single similarity. Except... I let the word hang in the air. Except what? Ethan asked, his voice tight now. Except the way you look at each other, I said softly. That's very similar. Actually, it's identical. You look at each other the exact same way. With love, with desire, with possession. Mia's face went pale. Ethan's jaw clenched. Sophie, what are you trying to say? He asked, his tone warning me to stop. But I was just getting started. I'm not trying to say anything, darling. I'm just making observations, like how strange it is that Mia touches you constantly, a hand on your arm, brushing against you, sitting so close. Is that normal for siblings? Maybe in your family it is. You're being ridiculous, Mia snapped, her sweet facade cracking. You're jealous because Ethan and I have a close bond and you feel left out. Maybe, I said calmly. Or maybe I'm just noticing things that don't add up, like how you knew where Ethan keeps his cologne without asking. How you knew he takes his coffee with 2 sugars and no cream, even though that's something that's changed since you supposedly last saw him years ago. How you know the exact spot on his back that gets tense and needs rubbing. The air in the room was crackling with tension now. Ethan stood up abruptly. I don't know what kind of game you're playing, Sophie, but it's not funny. You're making wild accusations based on nothing. Am I? I asked, still seated, still calm. Then let me ask you something directly, Ethan. If Mia is your sister, why did you come out of her room at 2 a.m. last Tuesday? I saw you. Don't try to deny it. She had a nightmare, he said automatically. Did she? Because I didn't hear any crying. I didn't hear any sounds of distress. What I heard, when I listened at the door, were whispers. Intimate whispers. And then laughter. Do you often laugh with your sister in her bedroom at 2 a.m? Mia stood up now, too. I don't have to listen to this. You're clearly having some kind of breakdown, Sophie. Ethan, I think your wife needs help. Oh, I need help, I said, finally standing. That's rich coming from you. Tell me, Mia, how exactly did you lose your apartment? What was the real reason you needed to move in here? I told you. I lost my job. Except you didn't have a job to lose, I interrupted. I checked. There's no employment record for you anywhere in the past 3 years. No tax returns, no W-2s, nothing. It's almost like you don't exist as a functioning member of society. Almost like your only job is being wherever Ethan needs you to be. The look Ethan and Mia exchanged in that moment was pure panic. They were realizing that I wasn't the naive fool they thought I was, that I had been digging, investigating. But here's what I find most interesting, I continued, walking slowly around the table. Neither of you have ever mentioned specific memories together. No stories about childhood birthday parties. No anecdotes about school, no shared friends, nothing concrete. Just vague references to growing up together. Why is that? Because it's painful, Mia shouted. We lost our parents. We don't like talking about it. Right. Your parents. Who died in a car crash. When was that exactly? What year? Mia looked at Ethan. Ethan looked at Mia. Neither answered. You can't remember? I asked, my voice dripping with false sympathy. You can't remember the year your parents died. How tragic. How convenient. I walked to the sideboard where I had placed a decorative box earlier. I picked it up and returned to the table. You know what else is convenient? This dinner. This beautiful, perfect family dinner. Because I invited someone special to join us. Someone who can clear up all these confusing questions. Ethan's face went white. What did you do? I found her, Ethan, I said quietly. I found your mother. Your very alive, very aware mother who you locked away in a nursing home and declared incompetent so you could steal her property and her life. The doorbell rang. The sound cut through the room like a gunshot. All three of us froze. Mia grabbed Ethan's arm, genuine fear in her eyes now. That wouldn't be the police already, would it? I asked innocently. No. They're not due to arrive for another hour. That must be our special guest. I walked toward the front door, my heels clicking on the hardwood floor. Behind me, I heard Ethan's voice, desperate now. Sophie? Wait, let's talk about this. Whatever you think you know. Oh, I don't think I know anything, I called back over my shoulder. I know everything. I opened the door. And there stood Margaret Blackwood, looking stronger and more alive than she probably had in years. She was dressed in a simple but elegant dress. Her white hair was styled. Her eyes were bright with anticipation. She looked past me into the dining room, and her gaze locked onto her son. Hello, Ethan, she said, her voice steady and cold. Surprised to see me? I imagine you are. After all, you thought you had buried me alive in that facility. But here I am, very much alive, very much aware, and very much ready to tell everyone exactly what kind of monster you really are. The silence that followed Margaret's entrance was deafening. It was the kind of silence that happens right before an explosion, right before everything falls apart. Ethan stood frozen at the dining table, his face cycling through emotions so quickly I could barely track them. Shock, disbelief, fear, and then, finally, rage. Mom, he said, and his voice shook. What are you doing here? Margaret stepped into my home with a dignity that took my breath away. This woman had been locked away, declared incompetent, stripped of her autonomy, and yet she walked in like a queen entering her throne room. What am I doing here? She repeated, her voice sharp as glass. I'm having dinner with my son, and apparently with his wife. She turned her gaze to Mia, and the contempt in her eyes was withering. Hello, Mia. Still playing dress-up in other women's lives, I see. Mia's composure shattered completely. You crazy old bitch. You're not supposed to be here. You're supposed to be locked up where you belong. Mia, Ethan hissed, but it was too late. The mask had slipped. Margaret smiled coldly. There it is. The real you. Tell me, dear, does Sophie know what you really are? Does she know that you and my son have been running this sick little con for years? She doesn't know anything, Mia spat. She's just another stupid, trusting Mark who believed every word Ethan fed her. I couldn't help the laugh that escaped me. It was bitter and sharp. Oh, Mia, that's where you're wrong. I know everything. Both of them turned to look at me, really look at me, and I saw the exact moment they understood. The exact moment they realized I had been playing them just as much as they had been playing me. Ethan took a step toward me, his hands out in a placating gesture. Sophie, baby, listen to me. Whatever my mother told you, she's sick. She has dementia. She sees things that aren't real, makes up stories. That's why she's in a care facility. Really? I said, crossing my arms. Is that why the facility's medical records, which I obtained legally through Margaret's own request, show no signs of dementia, no cognitive decline, nothing except arthritis and high blood pressure? His hands dropped. Or maybe, I continued, you're referring to the fake medical evaluation you paid Dr. Richard Simmons $5,000 to produce? The one that declared her incompetent? The same Dr. Simmons who lost his medical license last year for fraud. Ethan's face went from pale to red. You've been investigating me? I've been investigating both of you, I corrected. Very thoroughly, for weeks now. Did you really think I wouldn't notice the way you looked at each other? The way you touched? The little slip-ups in your story? I'm not as stupid as you thought I was. Margaret moved to the dining table and sat down in my chair, as if she had every right to be there. In a way, she did. She was about to help me reclaim my life. Shall I tell her, Ethan? Margaret asked conversationally. Or would you like to do the honors? Shut up, Ethan growled. Just shut your mouth. I found the marriage certificate, I said quietly. In the attic, the photos, everything. I know you two got married 7 years ago in Las Vegas. I know you never got divorced, which means when you married me 5 years ago, you committed bigamy. Mia laughed, but it was the laugh of someone panicking. You can't prove any of this. Those could be fake photos, doctored documents. You're just a paranoid, jealous wife who can't handle her husband having a close relationship with his sister. Sister? Margaret's voice cracked like a whip. For don't you dare use that word. I raised one son and lost another. Ethan was supposed to be the good one, but instead, he fell in love with you in high school, and the two of you have been twisted together ever since. Do you know what it's like to walk in on your teenage son having sex with his girlfriend and hear them whispering about their future? About how they would travel the world, living off other people's money? About how love was for suckers and marriage was just a tool? She turned to me, tears in her eyes now. I tried to separate them. I sent Ethan to college across the country. I got Mia's parents to send her to a different school. But they found each other again. They always found each other. And then they started their games. Their cons, marrying wealthy women, stealing everything, and disappearing. You're lying, Mia screamed. You're a senile old woman who never understood our love. Love? Margaret stood up, her voice shaking with fury. You call what you do love. You destroy innocent women's lives. You steal their money, their homes, their dignity. You made Ethan marry a sweet girl named Patricia in Austin 6 years ago. She lost everything. Her inheritance, her grandmother's jewelry, her self-worth. She tried to kill herself after you two left. The room went deadly quiet. She survived, Margaret continued, her voice softer now. But she was never the same. And before Patricia, there was Maria in Phoenix. And before Maria, there was Jennifer in Seattle. How many, Ethan, how many women have you destroyed with your lies? Ethan's face had gone completely blank. It was a look I had never seen before. Empty, soulless. They were all so easy, he said finally, his voice flat. They wanted to believe in love, in fairy tales, in the idea that someone could actually want them. So we gave them what they wanted, a romance, a family, a purpose, and in return, we took what we needed. I felt sick. This was the man I had loved, the man I had trusted, and he was talking about me, about all those women, like we were nothing but resources to be exploited. What you needed? I repeated. You mean money, houses, property? You didn't need any of that. You wanted it. You're just thieves. Parasites. Mia stepped forward, her beautiful face twisted with anger. We're not parasites. We're smart. We see the world for what it really is. Everyone is just using everyone else. We're just honest about it. Honest? I almost choked on the word. You've been living in my house, eating my food, sleeping under my roof, pretending to be someone you're not, and you call that honest? I call it survival, Mia shot back. I mean, it was working perfectly until you had to go snooping around where you didn't belong. Margaret shook her head sadly. This is my fault. I should have stopped them years ago. I should have gone to the police when I first realized what they were doing. But he's my son. I kept hoping he would change, that he would wake up and realize how wrong this was. Well, he didn't change, Mrs. Blackwood, I said gently. And now it's time for consequences. Ethan's eyes narrowed. What are you talking about? I walked to the sideboard and picked up my phone. I'm talking about the Nevada police who have an outstanding warrant for your arrest. I'm talking about the fraud investigation that's been opened in 3 states. I'm talking about the bigamy charges, the identity theft, the forged signatures on loan documents, the fake power of attorney you used to steal your mother's property. I showed him my phone screen. It displayed an email from Marcus Webb with attachments, legal documents, police reports, affidavits from the other women Ethan and Mia had conned. I'm talking about the fact that I've spent the last 3 weeks building an airtight case against both of you with the help of a private investigator, a team of lawyers, and your own mother. Ethan lunged toward me, his hand reaching for my phone, but I stepped back quickly. Don't, I said sharply. Don't make this worse than it already is. Mia was looking around frantically, like a trapped animal searching for an escape route. We can fix this. Ethan, we can explain. We can say Sophie is lying. It's her word against ours. Except it's not, Margaret said calmly. She pulled a small recording device from her purse. I've been recording this entire conversation, every word, every admission, and it's being transmitted in real time to the police. As if on cue, there was a knock at the door, a hard, authoritative knock. That would be them now, I said. Ethan's face transformed into something ugly, something dangerous. You bitch. You stupid, ungrateful bitch. I gave you everything. I made you feel loved. I made you feel special. And this is how you repay me. You gave me lies, I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. You gave me a false life. You made me feel special so you could rob me blind. That's not love. That's abuse. The knocking came again, louder this time. Police! Open the door! Mia made a run for the back of the house, but I had anticipated that. The back door is locked, I called after her. And there are officers posted there too. You're not going anywhere. She spun around, her face contorted with rage. You think you're so smart, don't you? You think you've won? I don't think I've won, I replied quietly. I know I've survived. There's a difference. I walked to the front door and opened it. 2 police officers stood there, 1 male, 1 female, both with serious expressions. Officers, I said, thank you for coming. The people you're looking for are in the dining room. Ethan Blackwood and Mia Rosewood. They're all yours. What happened next was almost surreal. The officers entered, read Ethan and Mia their rights. The words washed over the room like cold water. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. Mia started crying, but they weren't real tears. They were calculated, designed to evoke sympathy. Please, you don't understand. She's trying to frame us. We didn't do anything wrong. We're the victims here. The female officer looked at her with an expression of pure disgust. Ma'am, we have arrest warrants from Nevada, testimony from multiple victims, financial records, and a recorded confession. You can save the performance for your lawyer. Ethan didn't cry, didn't plead. As the officers handcuffed him, he looked at me with pure hatred. This isn't over, Sophie. You think you can just destroy me and walk away? You have no idea what I'm capable of. Actually, I said, meeting his gaze without flinching, I have a very good idea of what you're capable of. That's why I made sure every single piece of evidence is documented, backed up, and in the hands of multiple attorneys. If anything happens to me, it all goes public. Every detail, every victim, every crime. You'll spend the rest of your life in prison. As they were led away, Mia turned back one last time. Ethan, tell them we love each other. Tell them this was all for us. And that's when Ethan said something that made even the police officers pause. Shut up, Mia. Just shut up. This is your fault. If you hadn't been so obvious, so careless, we never would have gotten caught. You ruined everything. The betrayal on Mia's face was almost satisfying. Almost. They had built their entire twisted relationship on using and manipulating others, and in the end, they turned on each other with the same viciousness. My fault, Mia shrieked as the officers pulled her toward the door. I did everything you asked. Every con, every lie, every performance. And now you're blaming me. You were supposed to be subtle, Ethan yelled back. But you couldn't help yourself, could you? Always had to touch me. Always had to mark your territory. Your jealousy gave us away. The officers finally got them out the door and into separate police cars. I stood on my porch, watching as the red and blue lights illuminated my quiet suburban street. Neighbors were coming out of their houses, drawn by the commotion. Margaret came to stand beside me, putting her thin arm around my shoulders. You did it, she said softly. You actually did it. We did it, I corrected. I couldn't have done this without you. We stood there together, watching as the cars drove away, taking Ethan and Mia toward the justice they had evaded for so long. Inside, my beautiful dinner sat cold and untouched on the table. The candles had burned down to stubs. The chocolate torte I had made would go uneaten, but I didn't care, because for the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe. The weeks that followed the arrest were a blur of lawyers, depositions, and paperwork. But through it all, I felt lighter than I had in years, like I had been carrying a weight I didn't even know was there, and someone had finally lifted it off my shoulders. Marcus Webb became not just my investigator, but a friend. He helped me navigate the legal complexities of annulling a marriage that was never legal in the first place. He helped me secure my assets, freeze the joint accounts before Ethan's lawyers could try anything clever, and reverse the fraudulent second mortgage Ethan had taken out on my house. You're one of the lucky ones, Marcus told me one afternoon in his office. Most of Ethan's victims lost everything, but you caught him before he could complete the con. I don't feel lucky, I admitted. I feel like an idiot. How did I not see it sooner? Marcus shook his head. Don't do that to yourself. These people are professionals. They've spent years perfecting their craft. The fact that you figured it out at all, that you had the courage to investigate and fight back, that makes you extraordinary. The criminal trial moved faster than I expected. With the recorded confession, the testimony from Margaret, the evidence from the other victims, and the financial paper trail, the prosecution had an overwhelming case. I attended every day of the trial. I wanted to look them in the face. I wanted them to see that they hadn't broken me. Mia's defense strategy was to claim she was a victim too, that Ethan had manipulated her since she was a teenager, that she didn't know what she was doing was wrong, that she was essentially brainwashed. But the prosecution brought in a psychiatrist who had evaluated her. Ms. Rosewood is not a victim, the doctor testified. She's a willing participant with full awareness of her actions. In fact, according to emails and text messages we recovered, many of the cons were her ideas. She was often the driving force behind their schemes. Ethan's strategy was different. He showed no remorse, no emotion. He sat at the defense table like he was bored by the whole proceeding. His lawyer tried to argue that the marriages weren't technically fraudulent because Ethan had genuine feelings for the women he married. The judge shut that down quickly. Mr. Blackwood, marriage fraud isn't about feelings. It's about deception and financial exploitation. This court is not interested in your romantic justifications for criminal behavior. The most powerful moment of the trial came when Margaret took the stand. She was nervous, her hands shaking as she was sworn in, but her voice was strong. The prosecutor asked her to describe her relationship with her son. Ethan was my world, Margaret said. tears streaming down her face. After his father died, he was all I had left. I gave him everything. My love, my trust, my life savings to put him through college. And he repaid me by stealing my freedom, my dignity, and my property. Can you tell the court what happened when you discovered his relationship with Ms. Rosewood? Margaret took a deep breath. I came home early from church one Sunday. I heard sounds from upstairs. When I investigated, I found them together, Ethan and Mia. They were in his bedroom, and it was clear they were not just friends. When I confronted them, they didn't even seem ashamed. Ethan told me that what he and Mia had was real love, and that I was too narrow-minded to understand. What did you do? I told him he needed help. I told him their relationship was unhealthy and that I was going to insist he see a therapist. I told Mia she needed to leave my house. Margaret's voice broke. 2 weeks later, Ethan had me declared incompetent and locked away. My own son stole my life so he could continue his sick obsession. The jury was visibly moved. Several members were wiping their eyes. When it was the defense's turn to cross-examine, Ethan's lawyer tried to paint Margaret as a controlling mother who couldn't accept her son's choices. Margaret looked the lawyer straight in the eye and said, "If wanting your son to be honest, to be kind, to be lawful makes me controlling, then yes, I'm guilty. But what he did wasn't a choice. It was a crime. Multiple crimes. Against multiple innocent women. Including the woman sitting right there." She pointed at me. Sophie trusted him, loved him, and he used that love as a weapon to rob her. That's not love. That's evil. The defense had no response to that. During the trial, I also got to meet the other women, Patricia from Austin, Maria from Phoenix, Jennifer from Seattle, and 2 others I hadn't known about, Rachel from Denver and Amanda from Portland. We met for coffee one afternoon during a break in the proceedings. It was surreal, sitting in a circle with 5 other women who had all fallen for the same lies, the same manipulation, the same false promises. Patricia spoke first. She was thin, with haunted eyes that had seen too much pain. "I almost didn't come today. I was so ashamed. But my therapist said it might help to meet you all, to realize I wasn't alone." "You're not alone," Maria said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "None of us are. That's what he wanted us to believe, that we were the only ones, that we were too stupid or too damaged to deserve real love. But it was all lies. We shared our stories. The details were different, but the patterns were identical. Ethan presenting himself as a successful, charming man with a tragic past. The whirlwind romance, the quick marriage. And then Mia appearing, always as some variation of family or old friend who needed help. The slow financial drain, the gaslighting, the eventual disappearance with everything. "How did you get away?" Amanda asked me. "How did you figure it out before they could finish?" "I found their marriage certificate," I explained, "hidden in my attic, and I had help. I told them about Marcus, about Margaret, about building the case." Jennifer started crying. "I wish I had been that brave. I knew something was wrong. I felt it. But I was too scared to investigate, too scared to confront them, and by the time I finally got the courage, they were gone with everything." "It's not about bravery," I said gently. "You survived. That's what matters. And now, we're here. We're testifying. We're making sure they face consequences. That's bravery, too." Rachel nodded. "Sophie's right. Every time we sit in that courtroom, every time we tell our stories, we're taking our power back. We're refusing to be invisible victims anymore." That meeting changed something in me. I had been so focused on my own pain, my own betrayal, that I hadn't fully grasped the scope of what Ethan and Mia had done. They hadn't just hurt me. They had destroyed lives, shattered trust, left a trail of broken women behind them. The verdict came on a rainy Tuesday afternoon. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Ethan stared straight ahead when the verdict was read, his face a blank mask. But Mia collapsed in her chair, sobbing loudly. Real tears this time, the tears of someone who finally realized they had lost everything. Sentencing came 2 weeks later. The judge was a stern woman in her 60s who had clearly seen enough of Ethan and Mia's games. "Mr. Blackwood, Ms. Rosewood," she began, "in my 30 years on the bench, I have seen many criminals. But what you two have done is particularly insidious. You didn't just steal money, you stole trust, you stole hope. You convinced vulnerable women that they were loved, that they were building a future, and then you tore that future away from them. The psychological damage you've inflicted is immeasurable. She sentenced Ethan to 15 years in federal prison for bigamy, fraud, identity theft, and elder abuse. Mia received 12 years for her role as an accomplice. Additionally, the judge continued, you are both ordered to pay full restitution to all victims. Every penny you stole will be returned. Your assets will be seized and liquidated. You will leave prison with nothing, just as you left your victims with nothing. As the bailiffs led them away, Ethan finally looked at me, really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes I hadn't expected. Fear. He was afraid. Not of prison. Not of the sentence. He was afraid because I had beaten him at his own game, because I had been smarter, stronger, more strategic. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just held his gaze until he looked away. Outside the courthouse, reporters were waiting. They had been following the case with intense interest. The bigamist con artist and his wife had become a national story. I gave one brief statement. Ethan Blackwood and Mia Rosewood presented themselves as family. They used the sacred bond of family as a weapon to manipulate and steal. They betrayed not just me, but multiple women and Ethan's own mother. Today, justice was served. But more importantly, today survivors like me are reclaiming our voices and our lives. To anyone who thinks they might be in a similar situation, trust your instincts, investigate, ask questions, and know that you deserve better than lies disguised as love. The restitution process took months, but eventually, I recovered everything Ethan had stolen. The second mortgage was reversed. The forged withdrawals were returned. Even some of my grandmother's jewelry that he had already sold was tracked down and returned to me. But the most meaningful outcome wasn't financial. I helped Margaret get released from the nursing home. With Ethan's power of attorney invalidated and her competency reestablished, she was free. She had nowhere to go, her house having been sold by Ethan, so I made her an offer. Move in with me, I said. Not as a guest, as family. Real family. Margaret cried when I asked, Sophie, you don't have to do this. After everything my son put you through. Your son's crimes are not your burden to bear. I interrupted. You tried to stop him. You tried to warn people. You helped me take him down. You're not responsible for the monster he became. So Margaret moved into my guest room, the same room where Mia had once slept, plotting my destruction. But now it was filled with light and warmth and genuine family love. We helped each other heal. Margaret taught me to garden, and we spent hours in the backyard, planting flowers and vegetables. I helped her reconnect with old friends she had lost touch with during her imprisonment. One evening, about 6 months after the trial, we were sitting on the porch, watching the sunset. Margaret turned to me with a soft smile. You know, Sophie, I spent 5 years locked away, thinking my life was over, thinking I had failed as a mother, as a person. But meeting you, helping you, being here with you now, it's given me purpose again. You saved me just as much as I helped save you. I took her hand. We saved each other. The other victims and I stayed in touch. We formed a support group that met monthly, either in person or via video call. We shared our healing journeys, our setbacks, our victories. Patricia got back into painting, something she had given up years ago. Maria went back to school to become a counselor for domestic abuse victims. Jennifer wrote a book about her experience. Amanda started a nonprofit to help women escape financial abuse. Rachel became an advocate for elder rights, inspired by Margaret's story. And me? I rebuilt my life piece by piece. I went to therapy to work through the trust issues and trauma. I reconnected with friends I had neglected during my marriage to Ethan. I threw myself into my graphic design work with renewed passion. But more than anything, I learned to trust myself again, to trust my instincts, to know that I was strong enough, smart enough, worthy enough to protect myself and others. 1 year after the trial, on the anniversary of Ethan's sentencing, I did something symbolic. I took the guest room that Margaret had been using and transformed it into my home office, a space just for me, a space where I could create and build and grow. Margaret moved into a beautiful apartment nearby, close enough to visit daily but independent enough to reclaim her own life. We had dinner together every Sunday, real family dinners, with honesty and love and respect. I never remarried. Maybe someday I will. Maybe I won't. But I learned that my worth isn't defined by having a partner. My happiness isn't dependent on romantic love. I am enough on my own. As for Ethan and Mia, I heard through Marcus that they were in different prisons, in different states. According to the reports, they tried to continue their relationship through letters at first. But even that fell apart. They blamed each other for getting caught. Their twisted love story ended the way it always should have, in mutual destruction. Sometimes, late at night, I think about all of it, about how close I came to losing everything, about the other women who weren't as fortunate as me, about the fragility of trust and the power of deception. But then, I look around my home, my real home, filled with genuine warmth and authentic relationships, and I remember the most important lesson of all. They tried to make the sacred bond of family into a weapon. They tried to use love and trust as tools for theft and manipulation. But in the end, they failed. Because real family, real love, real trust can't be faked, it can't be manufactured, it can't be used as a con, and that's something they never understood. The last time I saw Ethan was at a restitution hearing, where he was forced to sign over the last of his hidden assets. He looked older, broken, defeated. As I left the courtroom, I felt nothing for him. Not anger, not hatred, not even pity, just indifference. He had tried to write himself into my story as the villain who destroyed me, but I rewrote the ending. He became just a chapter I survived, a lesson I learned, a testament to my own strength. And that is the greatest revenge of all, living well, living honestly, living free. They thought family was a tool. I proved that family is a fortress. They thought love was a weapon. I proved that love is a shield. They thought I was weak. I proved them wrong. And now, they're spending the next decade behind bars, while I'm spending mine building a life worth living. Justice served. Lesson learned. Story ended. But my life, my real life, it's just beginning.